I want to welcome everybody here tonight. This is Montana Organic Association's conference in here to Missoula, and I just want to. Dee can't hear anything in the back. Can you hear me now? Okay. I just want to say a big thanks to all our sponsors, and we put them all on the wall to the left and the right for you, so you can take a look at them. This really makes this happen here this evening here. So thank you to all of them. Also. Here we go. I prepared this all night and I can't even remember what I wrote down. So, as I said, I just want to say welcome. And Jim Bongrower here is going to lead the show and introduce Maria Rodale. And just a few words about Jim here. He is a long-term supporter of organic. And he last year also received Montana Organic Association Lifetime Award of Service. So I'm going to hand it over to Jim because he's better prepared than I am. Here you go, Jim.
Wow. Thank you, Oli. Is that working for you in the back? Okay, great. Now if I can just see here. All right. Well, it is my privilege this evening to introduce our keynote speaker. In the course of preparing for this honor, I've reflected back over the last 35 years of how the Rodale family and the Rodale Institute have influenced my life and the lives of millions. As a child growing up on a farm in northern Wyoming, I recall husking sweet corn, shelling peas, snapping beans, and preparing other produce from our garden for canning and freezing. I also spent a great deal of time hand weeding sugar beets and herding sheep. When I was 12 years old, my father was forced out of farming due to early onset of Parkinson's disease, which likely was related to exposure of an organophosphate insecticide. 15 years later, I was introduced to the Organic Gardening magazine. I then began to devour various gardening books and seed catalogs. Since then, I've been growing much of my own food and obtaining it from friends who care as much as I do about the quality of their food. Unfortunately, for most of my fellow citizens, their food shed consists of highly processed, chemically dependent, GMO-laden foods manufactured by giant agribusiness corporations, which, in too many instances, share a revolving door with federal agencies that supposedly regulate them. The consequences of this system of production and processed packaged foods have resulted in rampant obesity, escalating diabetes, increasing food allergies and asthma, and along with a host of other abnormalities. It is projected that the youth of today will be the first generation in this country that will have a shorter lifespan than their parents. The Rodale Institute and 3 generations and now 4 generations of Rodales have steered many of us to better choices in managing agricultural lands for growing healthy, organic foods in our backyards. I attribute much of what I've learned about organic agriculture to their research and publications. Rachel Carson, in her award-winning book, Silent Spring, warned us of the devastating effects of DDT. Sandra Steingraber wrote Living Downstream and Having Faith. Theo Coburn penned Our Stolen Future. They, along with others, have documented the effects of agrochemical endocrine disrupting compounds that in the minutest of quantities have dramatically unintended consequences on humans and other animals. These courageous women have shone a light on the need to change our approach from attempting to dominate nature to one of learning how to cooperate with nature to produce the quality nutrition we need for a healthy life. Maria Rodale, in her book, The Organic Manifesto, How Organic Farming Can Heal Our Planet, Feed Our World, and Keep Us Safe, is following in their footsteps and expanding on how it is we already have the tools and the knowledge to grow food in harmony with nature. As she notes in her book, we know more about space than we do about the ground we live on, about the soil that sustains us. Maria is the CEO and chairman of Rodale Incorporated, which is the world's leading multimedia company with focus on health, wellness, and the environment, and the largest independent book publisher in the United States. She has won numerous awards, including the National Audubon Society's Rachel Carson Award and United Nations Population Fund's Award for Health and Dignity of Women. Let me present to you, Marie, some of the fine people of Montana who indeed are looking for and participating in a food system based on respect for nature and in awe of mycorrhizal fungi. Please join me in welcoming Maria Rodale.
So great. Well, welcome. It's so nice to see all of you, and I'm just so thrilled to be here, honored that I was asked to be here, and happy to be among like-minded spirits who appreciate the earth and work with it every day. So thank you very much for hosting me here. Okay, let's see if I can work this thing. The other way. There we go. So let's start with the fact that if you're here tonight, you are already a pioneer, and you're on the right path. But as you know from living this life and working this important work, it's not an easy path. There's a lot of challenges and a lot of barriers to change, but you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there. One of the things that I felt really fortunate when I wrote the book Organic Manifesto was I got to interview John Mackey, who was the founder of Whole Foods. And I know Whole Foods has become a controversial supermarket, and you probably don't have one here. Where I live in Pennsylvania, we don't have one either. But when you get to one, you see, and it's kind of like, good food today in Missoula is as good as, if not better than, Whole Foods. But it always was frustrating to me that people would criticize what Whole Foods has done, because they've really made huge progress for all of us in terms of access to organic foods. And I remember what it was like before there was Whole Foods and before they created competition, which made my local supermarket stock organic foods. And after about an hour of talking to him, he was starting to kind of loosen up, and he said, I get so frustrated because I feel like I've been out in the jungle for 30 years with a machete, building a road, and these people in SUVs come up and say, "Is this as far as you've gotten?" He's like, "Get out of your car and help me build the road." And I feel like that's what it's all about for us, really, is we're all here building this road, and we're not there yet, but we're a lot closer than we were 30 years ago, or even 60 years ago when my grandfather started out. So I'm going to say a lot of scandalous things tonight, make a lot of bold claims, and I want you to understand why you should believe what I'm going to tell you. And there's two reasons, really. One is my day job is as chairman and CEO of Rodale Inc. gives me access to one of the best private libraries and research librarians in the country. I worked very closely with a woman named Diana Ernie, who really, everything that I say in the book that is in any way kind of controversial or even not controversial is footnoted. There's 187 footnotes in the book. And she was able to, and the library there was able to give me information that I couldn't have found on my own, and that is just really important information. So I felt like very blessed and able in that I had a lot of information at my fingertips. If those of you aren't aware of what Rodale Inc. publishes, we publish Men's Health, Women's Health, Prevention Magazine, Organic Gardening, which I'll talk about in a little bit, Runner's World, and we also publish books like The South Beach Diet and Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, and Eat This, Not That, in case anybody has seen that. By my other day, I'm co-chair of the Rodale Institute, which is the home of the longest running scientific study comparing organic agriculture to chemical agriculture. Next year it's going to be 30 years old, and it's been studied and worked on for 30 years by scientists around the world, and it's a vast wealth of information and facts and findings that I'll share with you tonight. But let's start with another aspect of why you may want to, if not believe what I say, at least listen to what I say. You know, I've lived it. I grew up on the first modern organic farm in America. My grandfather, J.I. Rodale, was the father of the organic movement in America. He wasn't the only person talking about organic. He was actually part of a whole group of people, mostly British people like Sir Albert Howard and Lady Eve Balfour and Lord Northbourne, who were talking about the soil being alive and how important it was to grow food in a holistic system, an integrated system. And my grandfather had grown up in New York City and was not a very healthy person. So he was on his own personal journey to improve his own health and started experimenting, bought a farm, started experimenting, and launched Organic Gardening Magazine in 1942. It was a great place to grow up. Betty, are you there? The bakehouse. I'm going to walk over and show Betty the bakehouse. It's right in there. Betty brought a picture from 1972, organic gardening, with a brick wood bake bread oven. And she's like, where is this oven? I need to know where it is. So it's in that little cottage back there. But when I was a kid, when my grandfather was still alive, I was 7 when he passed away. You know, there were cows and pigs and tractors, and you know, it was fun. There was hay in the barn. We used to build a lot of forts. So when my father took over, he was busier with the company, so he switched it more to a tree farm, actually. He called it a working tree center. So it's been a place that's evolved and changed, and this is the original farm. The Rodale Institute, you'll see pictures of later, is about 20 minutes away from here. And we ended up building that, or buying that farm because, let's see, in the late 60s, early 70s, when the hippie movement kind of adopted organic as its passion, we had problems with people driving to the farm and staring in our windows while we were eating dinner and trying to figure out what we were eating. So we said, let's build another farm, or let's get another farm to do the research and keep this farm to ourselves. So, but it's still a family farm. This is my grandfather, and what I learned from him about being a pioneer is that you have to be willing to be made fun of and be ridiculed. And be like alone sometimes. And what struck me about this is, like, even though it's 60, 70 years later, we've made a lot of progress. I got a letter on my blog from a woman from Montana named Shannon. I don't know, is Shannon here? She's there. Hi. And people still get made fun of for going into groceries with bringing your own bags. It's still hard to be an organic farmer, even though it's more profitable and it's more productive, and it's a great way of raising, a safe way of raising a family and living a life. So, so to be a pioneer, it does take courage. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the 5 most important things about modern organic farming, and what I learned from researching my book and writing my book, and how important it is for all of us to really rally together and unite and build bridges and try to sort of sing from the same songbook and march, as much as we all come from wanting to, march to the beat of a different drummer. It's like at some point we have to start marching to the beat of the same drummer in order to get change made and done. I am specifically using the word modern organic farming, you will notice, because a lot of times when I talk to chemical farmers, they'd say things like, oh, you mean like going back to the way it was, the old ways? 40 acres and a mule? And we know that that's not true. I mean, there's been so many developments in best practices that we need to integrate and learn from, that it's not about going back, it's about going forward, and going forward in a new, stronger way. So that's the first lesson here, is it's modern organic farming. It's not old-fashioned organic farming. The first thing I wanted to determine, and I feel I did determine, is that organic is better than local. I know the local movement is very popular, and I love local food. I'm a huge fan of local food. But I wanted to get to beyond the emotion of it and say, okay, what's the reality? What is really the truth here? So I have 2 stories about organic versus local that I've based my decision on, that organic is better than local. And the first goes back to my childhood. When I was a kid, in the 60s, what we did for entertainment was go for a drive with, cars with leaded gasoline and no seatbelts. But the good old days, that's right. And we would drive to the local orchard called Moore's Orchard, and they had a little roadside stand, and you get apple cider, and it was fun. It was a great day, and I had so many happy memories from that. And as I started writing my book, and every morning I'd read the morning call, the Allentown Morning Call, and I started to notice that there was a problem with Moore's Orchard. Moore's Orchard had been turned into a housing development, and what they now were discovering was that the amount of lead and arsenic in the wells and the soil was 50 times higher than the EPA safe level. So I'm reading that going, what is that from? Well, it turns out lead arsenate was the major pesticide used on orchards in the early 1900s up to the 30s and the 40s, and it's still there. It's still there. It doesn't go away. In Butte, yesterday I learned about lead and arsenic from mining. It's very similar. We produce things and we think it's all about just the apples or the copper, but it's really about what we're doing to the land while we're mining and harvesting and growing those things. So I believe when you are buying chemical local food, you're contaminating your own local community. And the first place you want to start is keeping your own local community safe. The second study that I uncovered has to do with food miles and carbon neutrality. PepsiCo, which is, it's a big company, they make a lot of stuff all over the world. They wanted to do a analysis of the food miles and carbon footprint of Tropicana orange juice, because their customers in England were demanding that. They wanted to know, should I buy juice from Florida if it has to be shipped over to England? And so they brought in a McKinsey-like objective third party to analyze the food miles, and what they found was surprising to them and shocking to them, and the fact that they published this study I think is really important. By far, the biggest source of carbon waste was in the development and application of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, not in transportation. So I think it's really important to realize, whether it's near or far, your local community or a coffee plantation in Peru, those chemicals are contaminating local communities. And I think it's more important to keep them clean and safe. And here's why. No, here's why. It's because these chemicals are making us sick. They're really making us sick. When I started researching my book, I thought the health argument for organic would all be around nutrition. I'll find all the research about how much more nutritious organic food is. And I quickly realized, it's mixed out there, but that's really not where the health issue is. It's not about nutrition. We actually are over-nutrientized in this country in many ways. It's really about the health problems that are being caused by these chemicals in our environment. And actually, even since I wrote the book, the president's cancer panel came out that basically validated and put a presidential seal of approval on every single study that I mentioned in my book, which is shows that autism is very likely caused by agricultural chemicals, diabetes, and that's from the government's own study that they're doing in Iowa and North Carolina, obesity, cancer, infertility, miscarriage, birth defects, ADHD, all these things that we look around us and say, why are our kids, why is 1 out of 100 kids today, 1 out of 100 diagnosed with autism? Why does every kid seem to have ADHD? And then with GMOs, there's I found a study, actually not a study, but a statement by the American Academy of Environmental Medicine that called for a ban and moratorium on GMOs because they're finding kidney and liver failure, digestive disorders, and accelerated aging, which I think, why isn't everybody paying attention to that? So it's serious stuff. I'm making a joke almost because it's so serious, it's almost hard to fathom. And one of the sort of specific examples I'll talk about for this is atrazine. Now, I'm sure a lot of people in this room are familiar with, just how bad atrazine is. It's known to cause gender disruption in amphibians. So it turns, male frogs into female frogs. It sterilizes female frogs. It disables the ability for frogs to reproduce. And these are all at levels that are deemed safe for humans. So where's the testing on humans? Guess what? It's us. It's us. And it's our children. And what shocked me the most is that atrazine is made by a company in Switzerland called Syngenta. And in Switzerland, atrazine is banned. So, yeah. It was kind of a depressing book to write. So the third reason that we need to switch to organic farming is that organic can stop global warming and climate chaos. We are seeing unprecedented amounts of flooding, drought, climate chaos. I don't think you need to believe in global warming to believe that there's something going wrong with our weather, and not just the weather, but the ability of our land to deal with that weather. So this is where the farming systems research comes in. After 30 years of measuring the differences in the soil between chemical and organic soil, what we're finding is that organic soil is so much more absorbent. When you look at it under a microscope, it looks like a sponge. And it literally enables the plants that grow in it to have much bigger, stronger root systems that are both resistant to flooding and resistant to drought. And this conventional chemical soil, on the other hand, it's like sand. The water goes right through it, the chemicals go right through it, it all leaches out into the groundwater and then into the stream. So there's an absorbent factor that is just, you can see with your eyes when you're out there. What you can't see with your eyes is that all the little mycorrhizal fungi. So happy I can say that in this room. And all the other living things. In one tablespoon of soil, there's more living things than people on this planet. And those things are alive, and they're alive in organic soil. They're dead in chemical soil. And what we're finding, and what other researchers are finding, it's not just the Rodale Institute, is that those organisms absorb carbon. Now, carbon sequestration is one of those confusing words. We emit carbon all the time, carbon dioxide, when we're breathing, when we're driving cars, when we're heating our homes. We hear about this all the time. That's what the focus of the climate change debate is about that kind of the excess carbon. And it's why planting trees are so important, because trees take that carbon dioxide and turn it into oxygen. But what I think the missing link is, and what I'm calling the new carbon cycle, I just invented that a few weeks ago actually, is that the soil plays a critical role in that processing, that cycle of carbon release and carbon absorption. And so I'm not a scientist. My grandfather wasn't a scientist, and sometimes I think that makes it easier to sort of make connections between things, because I'm not just so focused on the details. So, as a person who's in the health and wellness industry on a day-to-day basis, I'm like, I'm going to look up the symptoms of carbon dioxide poisoning. What if we have too much? What if it's not the weather that's going to get us, but just all that carbon dioxide in the air? And what the symptoms of carbon dioxide poisoning are headaches, drowsiness, high blood pressure, depression, fatigue, and I'm thinking, check. A little bit of a hypochondriac, but these are things that are that are common. They're very common. Well, what comes next? Coma and death. And this is the scariest chart that I found. And it's a NASA. It's from the NASA website, so it's government data. And what it shows is that for the last 400,000 years, the carbon dioxide in the air has stayed below 300 parts per million, or something like that. And that spike that you see is just in the last 50 years. The chart to the right is just of the last 5 years, so you can see, if this were spread out. But we don't know what that means. We don't know what that's going to do to us. And I think that's as much of a thing to be worried about as, whether it's going to get warmer or colder, or whether ice caps are going to melt, because you can always build dikes. So, I'm sorry, I have to laugh. There's so much depressing information, I just have to laugh all the time and keep myself, entertained. So the fourth thing I, question, debate, was can organic feed the world? And the answer is a resounding yes. Resounding yes. First of all, thank you. First of all, the whole we need to feed the world is a marketing campaign by the chemical companies to sell more chemicals. Because what the Farm Bill is all of our tax dollars going to stop farmers from growing so much food. And the Farm Bill, the USDA itself, issued a report in 1984 that said, as much as they try to get farmers to stop growing food because there's too much food, they've failed. Because the more food that farmers grow, the lower the price goes of food in general, and then the less farmers make, and the more they feel like they have to grow more food to make a living. And so it's this treadmill, this cycle that is kind of broken. And the only way to fix it is to just stop believing that, and start believing that, yes, we can grow enough food. And the scientific research of organic agriculture backs that up. And I'm not just talking about the Rodale Institute, I'm talking about other universities that have replicated what we've done that show that organic agriculture is more productive, it's more profitable for farmers, and it's better for the health and the environment by far. It also regenerates the soil rather than destroying the soil. So over time, your farm can actually get better as opposed to worse. And that's really important. So yes, organic can feed the world. In fact, it's the only thing that can. And just an interesting factoid from my book, I actually found the smoking gun of who invented that concept of that we can't feed the world without chemicals. And it was a guy named, I couldn't make this up. His name was William Crookes. And the actual quote, it's in my book, but it basically has to do with, if we don't use chemicals, we're not going to grow enough food for white people. So, the chemical companies left out that part. So, and just in case you need visual evidence, this is this year's side-by-side, one of the side-by-side comparisons at the Rodale Institute. And the corn on the right is the organic corn. And the corn on the left, not only is it not organic, but it was planted 2 months earlier than the corn on the right. So there were fungicides applied to the corn on the left because it was planted early when it was wet, and all sorts of chemicals and herbicides, and you can see. It's beautiful. I encourage everyone to come out to the Rodale Institute and see for themselves. And this is an aerial view of the Rodale Institute. If you would have seen a picture of this from 1973 when my parents bought this farm, it would have been all brown, like tan, kind of like the hills of around Butte. And this right here is the farming systems trial. And up there, the brown lines, that's our compost, part of our compost production system. We have apple orchards up there that are organic. We have a great apple picking, you pick apple festival, and I make organic hot dogs on the grill. So, and I also make organic vegan hot dogs on the grill, which makes some people cry. But what we found, and what I know a lot of you have found, is that it can be done. It's hard. Farming is hard, but it's good hard. It's honorable hard, and it's the work that needs to be done to grow the good food and the good life and the good health for all of us. There's no super weeds, no genetic drift, no less fossil fuels, a little bit more labor, but I always say that creates jobs. Organic farming creates jobs. But the key word here is modern. So those are all the reasons why I think organic is important, and it's going to save the world. But it's also, the fact is we're up against some formidable foes. This is one of my favorite things that I found when I was researching my book. It's from a 1950s DuPont chemical brochure. And this is a sales piece for chemicals for the 50s. This was like a good thing. They were saying, look at all the ways we are helping this farmer from Pennsylvania actually improve his productivity and master nature and kill destroy weeds and, I mean, there's literally phrases like "soil is the enemy." I mean, it's great. I love it. What I wanted to emphasize here is that, and in my book I go through the history of all these companies, and it sounds like it's boring, but it was actually really fascinating. But these days we hear a lot about Monsanto, and there's no question Monsanto is a huge problem for all of us and for farmers. But it's not just Monsanto. That's the thing I learned. It is Dow, it's DuPont, it's Syngenta, it's Bayer and Bayer Crop Sciences. And one of the kind of urban myths, urban legends I really wanted to investigate and find out if there was truth to was the idea of, that agricultural chemicals came from the chemicals that were used to kill Jews during World War II. And yes, I found lots of documentation of that. So we're basically spraying on our fields, if we're using chemicals, the same types of chemicals that were used to kill the Jews. And there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. In fact, I couldn't help it as I was researching the book going, wait, who won the war here? Because all the guys who were running those companies before World War II ran those companies after World War II. Some of them spent a few months in jail. What was also interesting is that these companies like Bayer is a perfect example. Bayer, aspirin, Bayer Crop Sciences are pharmaceutical companies as well. Their roots are together as pharmaceutical chemical companies. So there's this vested self-interest cycle of, we're going to cause the problems and make money causing the problems, then we're going to make money solving the problems with pharmaceuticals. So it's hard to write a book like this and not end up being a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not, just so you know. So the other foe, and it's not really a foe, but it's a process, is the government, and it's just slow and status quo. It's not a leader, it's a follower. This is Secretary Vilsack, who, if you read the Farm Bill, is mentioned like 8 times as the secretary on every page of those 2,000 pages. So at the discretion of the secretary, or the secretary will decide, and the secretary this and the secretary that. I actually had a chance to interview him for my book. It was part of a bigger meeting, and I asked him, I said, you were elected into this position, but the Farm Bill was already in place. How much control do you have to change the Farm Bill now that you've been elected to kind of run the USDA? And he's like, that's a sore subject. He doesn't have much control, which is why this next Farm Bill is so important. And I actually think he shows some promise and there's hope, but it's going to take all of us working together to really push and use our voices as voters, as civilians, as people in a democracy to push the change. And one of the most optimistic pieces of news I had in the last month was a person I was meeting with had just been at the USDA, and he said, the people at the USDA are like wondering what's going on, because more and more of our elected officials are coming to us saying that their constituents are demanding organic. And I'm like, yay, it's working. So they listen. Sometimes it feels hopeless and you get like a form letter in response, but they do listen because they want to get reelected. The other thing, just an important thing to note about the Farm Bill is it's not just about agriculture. It's about school lunches. If anybody's interested in school lunches, it's a Farm Bill. It's about wildlife preservation, and it's also about food stamps. So it's a very broad thing, and in fact, sometimes I think we should rename it the Food Bill instead of the Farm Bill. Here's the other formidable foe, and that is confusion. My daughter Maya and I were just at the Organic Summit in Boston 3 weeks ago, and we heard from this major research company, that does research around the country and says, asks people, which is more important to you, natural or organic? How often do you buy organic foods? How often do you buy local foods? And what they came back with was that consumers are totally confused. They think natural is better and more important and cleaner than organic. They don't know the difference between local and organic. They don't know. So the more we divide amongst ourselves and come up with new labels and come up with new nuances, the harder it is for the average person going into the supermarket to understand what's going on and follow it. I mean, it's hard for me to follow it. So, and I see where I live in Pennsylvania, and the parents who my kids go to school with, they don't know what organic is. They don't know they don't know the difference between natural, organic, and local. And so when people don't know and they're confused, they tend to choose the cheapest food. And that's what the cycle that we're in. So I feel that I believe it's really important that we rally behind the word organic and work harder to communicate what it really means. So, we have to stop confusing people, and that's going to take us uniting and joining forces and working together. The vegetarians, I'm sorry, need to lie down with the carnivores. I love vegetarians and I love carnivores. I eat meat. I've been a vegetarian. But when I was the editor of Organic Gardening magazine for a few years, I couldn't believe the letters I'd get from vegetarians. They're so passionate and it's great, but it's also, did anybody read the story about Dr. Alan Green? He's a pediatrician, and he decided he was going to certify himself organic by going completely organic for 3 years. And he traveled around the country, because he's a speaker and he's a good guy, so he was, and he said the biggest thing he found was that when he would go into a place and ask for organic food, they'd say, "Do you mean vegetarian?" So, and even when I was a kid, kids didn't want to eat over at my house because they thought they always said, "Oh, you're going to feed us carrot sticks and tofu." I'm like, you don't know my mother. She would not let tofu in the house. So, it's like, I think the diversity is so important. Just like in a farm, diversity is important. But what's the uniting thing that makes us all healthy and happy? And that's taking the chemicals out of it. If we can take the chemicals out of, vegetables and soybeans and meat, then everybody, then we can have the which is better conversation. But let's prioritize. I also think it's really important to stand behind and embrace the USDA regulations. I meet a lot of farmers who say, "Oh, I'm beyond organic." And then when you talk further, they're like, "Well, I can't really, it's too much work to do the paperwork, or it's, too expensive for me to get certified." And I mean, I can understand that. It's hard. But what happens when you don't get certified organic is you're not counted. And we need as many people as possible to get counted, because the bigger the group we are, the stronger our voice. And if this seal isn't good enough, let's work together and fight to make it better. Because, I was not in the meetings that made this happen, but I watched my father for 10, 15 years try to get the meetings to happen. And then when he died, I watched other people, took 8 or 9 years just to get the first round of regulations going. And it's still, it's still an everyday struggle to keep those regulations strong and pure and relevant to society today. And that's no small thing. It's huge. So we need to stand behind it and support it. The locavores need to meet up with the fair traders. Again, I am all for local food. I love local food, except when it comes to my coffee. Locally roasted, that's okay. But, again, I love history. I love reading about history. Our whole civilization was built on trade. Trade is primal. People love to explore and, my daughter was talking about how, in Africa, there's Italian restaurants. There's more Italian restaurants than African restaurants. I mean, everywhere there's more Italian restaurants than anything. So, people just love food, and they love different food, and they love good food. Again, what's the uniting factor? It should be safe food, clean food, food that's not poisoning anybody in how it's grown, whether it's here or there. I also think, maybe controversial, that we need to stop using the word sustainable and stand behind the word organic. Sustainable doesn't have a definition. And if you go to Monsanto's website, Syngenta's website, Bayer Crop Science's website, they have sustainable right there in the front in green. That's not right. And my father was actually one of the people who, sat down with the chemical companies to get this whole certification process going. And one of the things, and to get government funding for organic research. And one of the things he had to agree to was that they can use the word sustainable because it gave them a foot in the door. And it takes courage to use the word organic. Sustainable is a safe word because it doesn't mean anything. And it's not threatening to anybody. But I feel like we've reached the point where by not wanting to threaten anybody, we are all being threatened. And again, a lot of work has gone into making that organic standard stand for something. And now we have to stand with it. You'll notice I don't use the word conventional. I don't think that's fair. Conventional has a feel-good thing to it, and there's nothing that feels good about chemicals, which is why I use the word chemical, even though I know technically we're all made of chemicals. And what I'm really talking about is synthetic chemicals. But one of the reasons I wrote the book was I was getting tired with us as a group being defensive and not offensive. And one of the primary ways to be offensive is to use words in a very strong way. They do it all the time. It's not violent. It's just taking a stand and saying, no, this is where we're drawing the line, and this is what we're claiming, and you can't claim that. You can't claim that it's conventional to poison the children and the animals and the future of this planet. That's not conventional. That's bad. That's chemical. So finally, we need to demand organic. And we need to look at it the way change has happened always in this world. It's been slow, hard, in fits and stops and starts, but the good thing always wins if enough of us work together to make it happen. So whether it was abolishing slavery or giving women the right to vote or the Civil Rights Act, those things were not easy. It wasn't, they weren't making people feel comfortable. I'm not saying we should all chain ourselves to the White House front gate, although I might do it. If enough of you join me. But I take heart in that we've already been at this for 60 years. And we've really made progress. We've made so much progress. And as somebody I recently met said, we've made progress, but the score is 97-3. There's only 3% of the acres in the United States that's in organic agriculture, and certified organic agriculture. So the score is 97-3. We've got a lot of work to do. But here's the reason why we have to do it. No, here's the reason why we have to do it. We're all one tribe. When we're down on the surface of the planet, it looks like we're many tribes. We're different religions, we're different genders, we're different nationalities, we're different, age groups. But when it's all said and done, we're going to rise and fall together on this planet. And so I think that's why it's important to demand organic and to realize we all together, if we unite, have a much stronger voice than if we don't unite. So thank you very much, and I'm honored to be here. And I'm happy to answer a few questions. I know there's a little bit more of the program after me, so I don't want to take up too much time with questions. And I'll be out there signing books. But are there any urgent questions? Hi.
What is the best first step to educate confused consumers?
I think it's to explain the USDA organic seal and how that's the one seal you can trust. Because it's been independently certified. It means that there's no chemicals that are put on the foods that are grown that way, and say, look for that little seal and you'll be fine.
Could you be kind enough to repeat the question when it's asked? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. The question was, what is the one thing you can tell confused consumers to do? So, what is that? What is that old commercial? Look for the Union label. I'm not going to sing it. But I remember how the song goes. Maybe we need a song. Okay, yeah?
I'm from Butte, Montana. I hope you won't hold that against me.
No, I loved Butte.
Well, I want to say one thing in particular, that you're real, girl.
Thank you. It's because I had a Nancy's pasty.
I'm glad you didn't say pasty.
No.
I have lots of questions, but the one important one that we're all, I think, should be concerned about, and I would like to have you answer me, what do you think about landfills?
Oh. The question is, what do I think about landfills?
Yeah, like where we throw all our waste?
Waste, yes.
Cover it up like it's not there,
Well, I think it's a major issue and it's a major problem. And one of the things I found in my research was that we're all basically getting pharmaceutical drugs in our bodies all the time from when people take drugs or when they flush them down the toilet. It gets into our water supply and it's not something that we filter out. So it's like this, pharma cocktail that is basically poisoning our water. So I think that's something that's very concerning. But I definitely subscribe to the whole idea of we have to just eliminate that waste to begin with and keep it out of the waste stream. But it's also not my area of expertise. So.
Maria, are you aware of any beginning farmer programs that are working at the mid-scale farm, teaching our next generation how to farm without?
The question was, am I aware of any new farmer programs for the mid-scale farmer, teaching them how to farm without chemicals? Well, first of all, the Rodale Institute has a great educational program and a farmer transition course that was funded by the USDA. NCAT has tons of research and educational materials. And I know, one of the reasons I got to meet Secretary Vilsack is because he's doing this People's Garden initiative where they put a certified organic garden on the front of the USDA, and they're replicating that around. And he definitely wants to help the new. There's a lot of new farmers coming in, and that's an area that needs work and help. So, so there's a lot going on, but there's also room for a lot more to go on. Betty?
I wondered how that translates to the, if you want to call it a food program, how does that translate into the educational system for the food life program?
Well, again, the Farm Bill, how does all this translate into the school lunch and education program? And, the Farm Bill does include school lunches, and I'm very heartened to see that, whether it's Alice Waters in the Edible Schoolyard, or our Jamie Oliver, the Food Revolution, the Dr. Agatston who wrote the South Beach Diet for us, he's doing it in Florida in schools. So it's really, it's a true grassroots movement. It's happening all over the country, and I think parents, it's the one thing when we're out, moms want kids to learn how to garden and cook in school. And so I think it's a huge opportunity, and it's something that we should be fighting for in the Farm Bill, because right now it's just, basically feeding our kids the garbage that's left over from growing too much chemical food. Yeah.
I've read conflicting information about organic produce that comes from Mexico, China, these various other places. And I was wondering what your opinion is on that, considering what you're talking about.
Right.
Organic is better than local.
Yep. So the question is, she's heard conflicting reports about organic foods from China or Mexico, and if it's safe, and how that fits into my viewpoint. And I think it's a really important point, because actually there's more demand in the United States for organic food than there are farmers growing organic food. So it's a huge opportunity for farmers to supply that demand. That's why Whole Foods is going to China, and that's why stuff is being grown in Mexico. But if that food is grown there, according to Jeff, that I confirmed this yesterday, it has to meet the USDA regulations in order to get the seal on it. So, and that means it's independently certified. So I think you can trust it as much as you can trust anything.
Well, and just one quick addition to that, because what I did read, even though that is true what you just said, that there are not enough inspectors to go to these places to actually verify whether they are following the guidelines.
That's probably true, but I've talked to people at Whole Foods and Organic Valley, and what they're doing is they're going themselves. And hand-picking the farms that they're buying from, because they trust, they want their customers to trust their brands.
Is there any effort at the government level to try to enforce labeling of genetically modified food?
That question is a tough question. Is there any effort at the government level or at any level to label genetically modified foods? There's huge efforts going on among the organic community, the non-GMO community. I don't think there's any consensus yet. I don't think the government wants it to happen, but I think we should make it happen. And again, I was sat in on a conversation at the Organic Summit where, leaders from all these companies were, trying to debate and figure it out. And one of the problems is that it costs more to test, for farmers to test more for GMOs. And, I'm sitting there thinking, well, why aren't we making Monsanto pay for that testing? So again, we have to go on the offensive and not just be on the defensive. And, And the good news is, I am scheduled to give this same talk on December 21st at the National Resources Defense Council to their whole staff. And they're looking at how they can use their legal muscle to tackle the Farm Bill and tackle some of these issues. So I'm hoping that, that they can get busy after that. Okay, one more question, and then I don't want to...
Could you clarify, does organic mean non-GMO?
Okay, the question was, does organic mean non-GMO? And again, Jeff, tell me if I'm right or wrong. Right now,
Yes.
GMOs are not allowed in organic food. What's not being done is the testing that is certifying that. Is that true?
Yes.
What
Sort
about
of.
corn?
There's residue testing that's increasing. But what will happen is GMOs I think that's clear. The act is really the process of rid of it. I think that what will happen, I didn't answer that.
Yeah.
It's very clear in the law that GMOs is not allowed
Right.
in the production. Whether it's encouraged inadvertently and now discovered because the OIG, USDA did not do their job, you gotta do testing.
Right.
And that's found, which is, if they look for it, they'll probably find it.
Yeah.
What happens.
Right. Right. So if I could summarize that briefly, for those of you who couldn't hear, is that the rules are clear, GMOs are not allowed in organic foods. What is still not clear is what happens if it's found when it's tested from drift and accidental contamination. And that's what the National Organic Standards Board and the whole industry is trying to figure out right now, and the USDA. So, great. Well, I'll be out there later to answer more questions, and I just want to thank you all. You're a great audience, and I'm thrilled to be here.
I think I'll just keep that graphic up. Thank you, Maria. That was an inspirational address, probably telling most of us what we should already know, and a very tough act to follow. My name is Doug Crabtree. I'm an organic farmer, an organic food enthusiast, and an organic certifier. I'm also a founding and lifetime member of the Montana Organic Association. It was my privilege to chair the 2010 MOA Awards Committee. When this organization was formed, one of our primary purposes for creating it was to support and encourage organic farmers and ranchers in Montana. And as Maria eloquently told us about, being an organic practitioner can be a lonely and daunting challenge. By definition, organic producers do things differently than our neighbors. And the support network in place for non-organic farming, from universities, Extension, the USDA, and the State Department of Agriculture, is often lacking. To help bridge this gap, organic producers seek support and encouragement from others in our organic community. Few of us would have the courage to start organic ventures, much less to sustain them, in the face of challenges without the support, encouragement, and examples provided by our peers. The MOA Awards are given each year to honor 2 special members of our community who have demonstrated outstanding service to organic agriculture in this state. The Lifetime of Service Award is presented to an organic producer, handler, retailer, researcher, or service provider who has demonstrated a long-term commitment to organic agriculture in Montana. I would like now to recognize all of the previous recipients of this award who may be in attendance. If I read your name, I'd ask you stand up. They are Robert Betcher, Barry Flam, Bob Quinn, David Oyen, and Jim Barngrover. The Leadership in Organics Award is presented to an organic producer, handler, retailer, researcher, or service provider who demonstrates an ongoing commitment to advancing the adoption, practice, and success of organic agriculture in Montana. Again, let's recognize the previous recipients who may be in attendance. They are Margaret Scholes, John Tester, Jonda Crosby, Mike and Nancy Lund, and John and Amy Quallen. And now, to present the 2010 Lifetime of Service Award, Jim Barngrover.
This is called paying your dues. Well, actually, I think I'll enjoy this. This year's recipient of the Lifetime of Service Award may be the only person in this room that has run in the Boston Marathon. And other than the recipient, if anybody in this room has run in the Boston Marathon, would you raise your hands? Oh my gosh.
2 award winners.
All right, Barry Flam. That's great. I did not know that. We've got more beers to discuss this around. Well, I'm going to shoot for something that I think is unique to this person. In fact, I'm quite confident that this is the only person present that has dined with President Johnson and Thurgood Marshall on the day of his appointment to the Supreme Court. Anybody else? All right. Now we're narrowing it down. This person has lived without a personal vehicle for maybe 6 or 7 years by my guessing, but it's been some time. And he rides his bike to work and around town. He's a graduate of MIT, where he received a presidential scholar, and I'm guessing that's how he ended up at the White House with LBJ and Thurgood Marshall. I'm not certain of that, but might be. He's a charter member of the Organic Certification Association of Montana, which was a precursor to in a way, of the Montana Organic Association. As a computer nerd, he has written commercial software for Macintosh. He has served as a former president of the National Nutritional Foods Association. He has maintained high standards of providing real food by screening for unnatural ingredients, including genetically modified ingredients. He has the first commercial retail food establishment in Montana to be certified organic. He is supportive of organizations promoting organic foods and local foods. And we both have close personal ties as fellow former residents of the Feathered Pipe Ranch, where he first came to cook for a yoga retreat in exchange for a 3-week yoga course, and ended up staying there for many a year. And what I recall about that in particular, I came a few months later, I believe, is that he had a couple of young goats when I came to the ranch. They were cute and cuddly. As they matured and became maybe not quite so cute and cuddly, he asked me to take care of them, and they became the anchor for my small dairy goat herd. In his most recent column in his store's newsletter, he says, quote, "I encourage you to eat your vegetables and to vote your mind and heart. It's a surefire, new, revolutionary miracle, secret, ancient Oriental way to a slimmer waistline, better sex, and eternal life." I now ask that Laughing Water, the general manager of the Real Food Store in Helena, come forward. I'd like to present you with a well-deserved award and recognition for lifetime of service to. Wow, standing ovation. I think that might be the first I've ever gotten. You can trust that I won't talk long. I'm getting over a cold, which is partly why I won't be here tomorrow. But most of what you're hearing is a chronic condition. It doesn't feel as bad as it sounds. I wish I could take the time to correct all the things that Jim said about me. But the most important thing is this is a heck of a group of people. I think what we're facing is an evolutionary challenge. Can't we live in harmony with nature? We either make the next step or something nowhere near as good happens. So I think we're doing the most important work we could be doing. So I thank you, and it's a great honor to be in the company of these people. Thank you.
To present the 2010 Leadership in Organics Award, allow me to introduce a man who needs no introduction. The Organic Trade Association's 2010 Organic Leadership Award winner, and the 2007 MOA Lifetime of Service Award winner, my friend and mentor, Bob Quinn.
Well, thanks, Doug. Here it is over here, right? Well, the award tonight is given to a really good friend of mine, and unfortunately he's not able to be with us, which is really a big disappointment to me because I watched this kid grow up, which when you start giving awards to the next generation, it really makes you take pause, it seems. But anyway, his parents moved to Havre shortly after we moved back to the farm, and so he played with, he and his brothers and sisters played with my kids. And he grew up and moved away and went to school. And meanwhile, I started a flour mill about 50 miles from my farm. And if any of you have ever tried to manage something 50 miles away, I have a hard time managing something that's in the backyard. But having a flour mill 50 miles away was a little bit of a challenge. And for those of you that know me know that book work and finances aren't my really strong suit. I like to grow things. I like to sell stuff. I really enjoy that. But at the end of the year, my banker would want to know if I made any money or not. Of course, the IRS wanted to know too. And I really, most of the times I didn't really know. And it took me quite a few months between January right up to the deadline in April to get my books ready to turn into the accountant. And then he figured it out if I made or lost anything. And after, and some years I did very well and made good money, and some years I lost a lot. And I just kept writing checks. I didn't really have a feel, you see, for these kind of things. Well, this award recipient showed back up in the territory. with an MBA. Do you know what that means? That means he knows how to figure. He knows how to figure profit and loss before it actually happens. Which is really a good place to have it, because that means you can set your prices correctly in relation with what you're buying things for. Anyway, I had the opportunity to hire him as part of my staff in about 92, after I'd been in business for about 9 years. And after 7 years, I ended up selling the whole flour mill to him. And it was a great transition for me. You know, everybody needs an exit plan. This is really important. And the time to think about an exit plan is not, you know, the last week of your life. You need to think a few years out, because transitions take time. And this young fellow came in, and not only did he do a great job, he didn't really know much about organic when he came in, but he latched onto that. And by the time 7 years had gone by and he bought the company, Montana Flour and Grains, he was a die-hard supporter of organic agriculture. By the time he came on board, we were nearly 100% organic, although we didn't start out that way. But by the time he came, we were. He took the base that we had created with Montana Flour and Grains and really built onto that. Some of the innovative things that he did was bring on a fellow that, in the name of Wes Gibbs, that was a former county extension agent, and put him in charge of kind of his extension of teaching and helping farmers with organic conversions and answering questions with organic agriculture. And I thought that was a great idea. Not only has he been a support to organic agriculture, but he's also been a support to sustainable energy and putting up one of the first wind turbines to help run his flour mill and cleaning plant there in Fort Benton. So he's continues to be a leader in that. Also, an important thing, he continues to be a source of a fair and consistent market for organic grains and feed grains and seeds and whatnot throughout, particularly north central Montana. Now that there's several, we have choices now, but he continues to be one of the favorite and one of those that's appreciated by the way he does business. So it's a great honor for me tonight to present this leadership award to Andre Giles, the owner of Montana Flour and Grains in Fort Benton, Montana. And here to, I guess, receive it on his behalf and to say a few words that he's been given to say is actually my nephew, and CEO of Keynote International. This is now we're looking ahead to my other transition program. Trevor Blythe. Trevor and his wife Tara live here in Missoula. So Trevor, if you'd come up, please. Trevor, try not to lose this, and make sure that Andre gets it.
I just met a little older with glasses. And,
Anyway, extend my congratulations. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. And no one quite says it like Bob. He's a tough act to follow. So I'll just put my 2 cents in. Being able to work with Andre for quite a while and getting to know him both professionally and as a person, I'm very impressed, incredibly impressed with his work ethic, his dedication. His character and his dedication to the organic industry and even to his community. So I'm very happy that he's receiving this award and happy to be reading his acceptance. So, hello all. Thank you, Trevor, for his willingness to stand up here and read someone else's words. I'm honored to have been chosen for this award by my MOA peers. I have to give thanks to Bob Quinn for hiring me with no experience so many years ago and introducing me to the organic industry. I must thank all the growers who have sold food to Montana Flour and Grains and all the customers who purchased that food. I'm in my 19th year at Montana Flour and Grains, and I've seen a lot of change. During my first few years, our community spent a lot of time discussing what the definition of organic was. We've matured a lot and gained a seat at the establishment table. It wasn't that long ago that the head of the Montana Department of Ag was calling organics a fraud. Now we have genuine support and respect from that department. Looking ahead to the next 19 years, I'd like to challenge us to work inside the box to improve the things we already recognize as problems. For example, Our school meals in Montana will be so much better if they reused our local organic food. I challenge us to make that happen. Outside-the-box thinking is needed to find solutions to problems and improve our society, but I'm better at maintaining and improving things than innovating, so others will probably do most of the outside-of-the-box thinking. Learning, education, and knowledge, continual learning, is one of the things that makes organic agriculture fun and ever-changing. The continuing education and experimentation that I see organic farmers, young and old, undertaking is fascinating. You're not being led by the universities how to farm. In many cases, you're leading them. Fun is very lacking in too much of our work, and so it's fun to have fun at work. I believe our organic community is always at the intersection of idealism and realism. Maybe I come to this award more through the realism channel. We live in a market-based economic reality. For all its idealism goes, for all its failings is still better in practice than any other economic system man has ever conceived. All our idealism goes for naught if organic farmers cannot sell their products for a profit. I guess that's where Montana Flour and Grains has a role at the intersection of idealism and realism. Wendell Berry wrote, "Honesty is the fundamental economic virtue. I believe with all my heart that it's more important to be honest than successful. I know it seems easy to say that when success has come, yet I truly believe I've always believed that you sell people a good product at a fair price and let the money take care of itself. My idealism is for honesty and integrity and sustainability. I don't want my obituary to say I was a businessman. If it says I was a man who conducted business, that is fine. But I don't want my whole life tied up in business. I want to work in our garden and with our livestock, and I want to enjoy God's creations. I want to raise children who have a moral compass that might be our greatest contribution any of us can make to the future generations. I have every intention of being a good example in and of the organic agriculture movement. Thank you again for this recognition." So congratulations, Andre.
Please. Well, as far as I know, that's all we've got for tonight. Let's go out and have some fun.